Listen to this, it's quite outrageous, really. Jesus says, "But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods," in South Africa we call that breaking and entering or mugging, "do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." Check out this picture. Baptist Church, whoever stole our air conditioning units, keep one. It's going to be hot where you're going. It's funny. I love it. I love humor like this. But there's a but here, isn't there? There's a but, hey? Many years ago, I was leading a church service, and at one point, one of the door stewards, and we'll just call him John for today, started waving an offering bag in the air, wanting to catch my attention. He thought I had forgotten to take the offering that Sunday, and being diligent in his duty, he wanted to remind me. And when at first I didn't respond because I was busy reading scripture or doing something else in the worship service, he began waving the bag even more vigorously. And by now we had passed the point in the service where we usually took the offering, and so he was getting more and more concerned. And when I noticed his now urgent bag waving, I said to him something like, "Hey, thanks, John. We're going to take the offering a little later in the service than usual." And I'm sure I didn't say anything like, "You can stop waving the bag now." I think I just said, "Thanks, John." And I remember my recollection of it is I remember my word being a grateful one, just a sense of going, "Thanks for the reminder." But John felt embarrassed by my response. Somehow I had shut him down. Somehow I had done something that day that had drawn attention to him and embarrassed him. And I'm not sure all of what went on in John's heart, but he ended up being ragingly mad at me. But when you break it down, here's what happened in that story. There was a faithful steward doing his duty, reminding the minister to not forget to take the offering. And believe me, it's very easy in a church service, even for experienced people, to forget to do things in a church service. He really was wanting to help, and you really want stewards like that on a Sunday. People who pay attention, people who care, people who take initiative. It's a wonderful thing. And I do know that I would have been grateful in that moment. I hadn't warned the stewards about the change. They didn't get an order of service. He didn't know that the offering was coming later. And so when I spoke to him from the front, all I was trying to say was, "It's okay, John. You don't have to worry about the offering. We will get to it. Things are a little different this Sunday." And so it really is the story of two well-intentioned people. And yet it's a story that ended up being messy and painful and hurtful. So it leaves me wondering, I wonder what was missing that day. I wonder what was missing, what went wrong. Because it should have been different, shouldn't it? It should have been different. I was speaking to a minister friend of mine recently, and he was telling me of two people in his church who had this, maybe it's not fair to describe, well, there's this misunderstanding, this disagreement, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but over a relatively small issue. One of the people had really behaved insensitively, perhaps even brashly, thoughtlessly, and had offended someone else. No malice, just brashness. And the person who was offended in this disagreement has been so deeply hurt, so deeply wounded, that they're now so angry that they can't even bear to look at the person who has offended them. They can't even look at them in the face. And at many levels you go, it's understandable, hey, because we know what it's like to be offended. We know when someone steps on our toes. Even around small things we can feel like that. It's not unusual. But there's a but in there somewhere, isn't there? There's a but there somewhere. Is it okay that we behave like that? Is it okay? Can we do better? Struggles with mental health have increased exponentially during this pandemic. I thought carefully about the words about what's happened. Here's my list. I think we live in a world with a mix of weariness and anxiety and isolation and depression and loneliness and restriction and relationship disruptions and uncertainty about the future and economic hardship. And this cocktail of emotions brood around us like a fog, hang around our neck like a killing weight. And our world, to varying degrees, but our world is living on edge. And in the midst of that, suddenly the words of Jesus seem even more and more impossible to listen to and to obey. I mean, even in good times, people find those words of Jesus challenging enough. But if you try to live the words of the Sermon on the Mount in a pandemic, when so many of us are just stressed out of our minds, imagine being asked to do those things. And so these words, these revered words, these Jesus words, run the risk, I think, of feeling like they stand in judgment over us, of provoking guilt within us, especially so in these times. And one of the symptoms of depression is this lingering sense of failure. And I think if we're not careful, reading scripture like this has the potential to do us in. It can leave us feeling, it can exaggerate our sense of failure. We just can't do this. So how can we, because we know we must, how can we hear these words of Jesus, these treasured words of Jesus, how can we hear them as life-giving words? How can they be filled for us with the love and life-giving power of Jesus? How can they be good news for us? And not just good news in that way, but how can, and I suppose this is the good news, how can they help us live in this stress-filled world? Rather than judge us, how can they help us live in this stress-filled world? Well, I wonder if I could just start. We're not going to cover it all. Can I just start with making 3 simple suggestions for us today? The first is to say, and you're going to need to listen to all 3 of them. The first is to say, I think we need to expect bad behavior. You know, when Jesus says in verse 29, if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, what he's really saying to us is it's going to happen. We are going to be offended. Someone is going to hit us on the cheek at some point or another. And in fact, probably quite often. Because none of us is going to get this right all the time. You will, as I will, we will undoubtedly behave badly towards others. And others will undoubtedly behave badly towards us. I suppose what differs is that for some of us it's a daily occurrence, some of us it's a weekly occurrence, and others perhaps stretch it out a little more, but we all will do the same. We will all behave badly. And so I think we need to be less shocked by bad behavior. Because I think sometimes it's the horror of it that makes us respond poorly. So if you're guilty of bad behavior, own up to it. And don't beat yourself up. Recognize that this stuff happens. We're not going to make it through life without behaving badly. And if others behave badly towards you, try to be gracious. Try to be understanding. Try to recognize that they are as frail and vulnerable as you are. Even see Jesus pushes us, even see if you can be kind to them, bless them if you can. But I think when we're less shocked by bad behavior, we have a much better chance of making things better. If we know it's coming, we have a much better chance of responding better. The second thing I want to suggest for today is that we and without contradicting what we've just said, other than expecting bad behavior, expect more from yourself. Now, I don't mean this to feel like pressure on you, but I think it's important to say, expect more from yourself. I love that little section. I read it quite speedily earlier, where Jesus groups these three things together, and he keeps saying, so what credit is that to you? And if you do this, what credit is that to you? If you do this, what credit is that to you? 3 times he's nudging us to go do better than the rest of the world does. Come on, you can do better than this. So the word is, don't accept bad behavior from yourself. Recognize that it will happen. Recognize that it does happen, but don't accept it as being normal. Don't make it acceptable. Don't justify it. Don't excuse it. When you behave badly, perhaps say to yourself, as I said to myself this week, I'm pretty sure Jesus would have done that differently. I'm pretty sure Jesus would have done that differently. Still, I think we must resist condemning ourselves. But do what you can to make it right. Do what you can to make it right. Feel the loving push of Jesus to correct our bad behavior, to move towards better behavior. And I want us to understand that Jesus pushes us in this whole passage. He pushes us because he knows that a generous, loving, forgiving life is much better than a life which isn't. A generous, loving, forgiving life is a better life than one that isn't. And my last quick word is, I think we must expect the help of Jesus. Our reading today began with quite an almost clumsy sentence, certainly in this translation. But the reading begins with the words, but I say to you that listen. But I say to you that listen. These words, in some ways, weren't meant for everyone. They were meant for those who wanted to hear, those who had ears to hear. Because the truth is, you will never, and I can say this with confidence, you will never obey these instructions in your own power. Never. Never, ever. In fact, if you try to obey them in your own power, I think one of two things will happen. You'll either kill yourself in one way or another, or at least you will kill your relationship with God. You might even come to hate God if you try to do this in your own power, because these expectations are so high, in a sense so contrary to human nature. So the only way we're going to become this kind of a person is with the help of Jesus. And that's what Jesus is doing in these words. He's painting a picture for us of the kind of person his followers can become with his help. With his help. And so these words are words for those who want Jesus to help them to be such a person. They are for those that want to listen, who want to be such a person. So quickly, let me just say, there are some things we need to do. This becoming a Jesus person doesn't just happen automatically. And we're not going to get into what those things are today. But with the help of Jesus, we can be a lot more like him. So John, the diligent bag-waving door steward, actually left our church that day. He resigned his membership. I tried to speak to him about it, but he wasn't interested. He was done. He was done with us. And it still leaves me thinking, there must be a better way.